And this will be shared on the Mountaineer Family Experience portal, also called the Parent Portal. So if you need to hop off for any reason or you want to refer back to it, a recording of the webinar along with the slides that our colleagues are going over will all be available to you to access by the end of this week or early next week so that you have access to those things. If you do still have any questions after the session is over, we know that we have limited time together. If you'll email, and we'll drop this in the chat and we'll say it several more times throughout, but if you'll email housing@appstate.edu with any outstanding questions that you have, we'll make sure that we get back to you and follow up with you personally. So without further ado, I'll pass it back to our wonderful university housing team to begin their presentation.
Thank you, Haley. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for showing up. I do understand that REAP can be very confusing and challenging, especially for incoming students. So I hope that this presentation provides a little bit more clarity for what I'm about to go through and what your students will have to do in a timely manner. But like they said earlier, it also is going to be available, like the slides themselves will be available for you to review at a later date. So don't feel too much pressure to feel like you missed something. I'm also happy to go a little bit slower if necessary. So kind of just to start, what is REAP? REAP is our current application. This opened on October 3rd, and it allows all of our students to go ahead and start applying for on-campus housing. So what this is your student currently has to live on campus in order to be eligible to complete this form. It should be currently in their housing portal. This is the same portal that your students utilize to get their first year housing when they applied last February or in between February and the summer. Students must apply for REAP to continue living on campus. I'm going to go into some of the nuances of that a little bit later on, but the first step in this process is to complete this application before the process closes. Kind of what I said a little bit earlier, to reapply for on-campus housing, your student will go first to their housing portal, and then they should see a button that says complete REAP for 2026, 2027. You must do the entire application. For your students to know that they have done this, they will get an email to their App State email, so their student email account, and they will receive a completion email, and I'll show you a bit of what that will look like a little bit later in the presentation. Next, they will be required to make and confirm their roommate group. They will be able to do this starting on December 4th. So right now, when they complete their application, it will be some general information. And then on December 4th, that's when they can search for their friends and future people who they have planned to room with for the upcoming academic year. We do recommend that students continue to monitor their email for their selection invitation because these are going to start going out in mid-January and they will run all the way through February. While we do want all of our students to apply for on-campus housing, and we highly encourage it, especially as you are looking for off-campus options just as a backup as well, I do think that it's important to note that on-campus housing is not guaranteed just by completing this first step of the application process. To know that your student has secured on-campus housing, they will sign a residence hall license contract. That will come later when they receive their selection invitation. But to be entered in for this lottery, it is important to make sure that your student does this application so that way they see that email and the opportunity to then sign their contract later on. So I think I misspoke a little bit earlier. REAP opened earlier this year. It opened on September 30th, just to make sure we have students applying in a good amount of time. And it does not close until December 2nd. So if your student hasn't applied yet, that's fine. I do recommend doing that sooner rather than later. But the start of this application was 9:30. Students should have received an email to their App State email as well, letting them know that this process is open, and they should have also received a step-by-step tutorial outlining how to start the reapplication process. Once REAP closes on December 2nd, that process cannot be reopened or gone back to. We will open our automatic waitlist at that point, and that would be the only opportunity for your student to apply for on-campus housing after December 2nd. So just kind of keep that in mind as your students are applying. After that, another couple of important dates to remember is that roommate selection window will start on December 4th. After that, we have the first day of selection invitation, which we currently anticipate for January 12th. And then finally, we do send offers until we reach capacity, and we want to send an offer to all of our students who reapply for on-campus housing like we have in years past. So our current projected date in order to do that will be February 27th, but just keep in mind our students will be notified once we reach capacity and are no longer sending offers for on-campus housing. So to kind of show you like a visual in because I know that was just a lot of information. I'm going to go through a step by step of what your student screen should look like as they are applying for on-campus housing. This is also available on our housing website and was emailed to all of our students, like I mentioned previously. And for students seeing this communication, it would be September 29th, the date that they would want to look for. And that would let them know that, hey, REAP is opening and here's a step-by-step tutorial of what you should see so far in this first process until roommate groups open on December 4th. So what your first student is going to see when they log into their housing portal, this should be the automatic screen they see when they log into it. To log into your student's housing portal, they can find the link on our housing website, and then they would just click on that and type in their student login credentials, typically their App State email, and then whatever password they've created. And then they're going to hit the continuing student reapplication button. Once they have clicked that button, they will see an option to begin the application. So it's just telling you the dates that REAP has been open, when they close. It gives you a little bit of a timeline bar so you know which part of the application process you are on. And it gives you your student's first and last name and classification just to make sure all of that information is correct. Once your student begins the application, they will select the term. So for the upcoming year, that's going to be the 26-27 academic year. After that, they're going to put some general information. So same thing previously to their first year application. They're going to want to put their cell phone number, their contact name, their emergency contact information. An important part that I would point out in this emergency contact is if your student is under the age of 18 and as a parent you are going to need to sign their contract, this is where your information should go so that way you see the copy of the contract to sign for your student. Sometimes students kind of put themselves in this information category, and the contract can get a little bit confusing. If your student is over 18, that you don't have to worry about that. But for all emergency contact, missing person information that your student would like to put in, this is the part of the process that they would enter that information. After that, this is going to take your student to their roommate matching profile. So I know I said that they can't make roommate groups until December 4th. What this part is where they do their lifestyle questionnaire and they ask if they're searchable. So if your student would like to find their roommate on December 4th, they should all be hitting yes to go ahead and be searchable and to find roommates. This will allow students to find each other if they already know what roommate they want to create. I'm going to a little bit later why roommate groups are not required, but this is where they would, if they would like to be searchable and change their mind at a later date, I highly recommend putting yes. And then answering their lifestyle. So are they okay with someone who drinks or smokes vapes? Are they okay having someone who has an earlier schedule than them, what times they prefer to go to bed? This part is also useful for when your students are searching for roommates. So let's say a student doesn't know who they want their roommate to be just yet, but they do know they want to find someone later on. Students will be able to see their compatibility prior to selecting their room with other students, and this is where they can use that information that they fill in. After all of that is submitted and complete, your student's going to hit the submit button and it's going to let you know that your application isn't ready yet and this is only the initial REAP submission. All students will continue to get their emails to their student account once that's complete, and once they hit the submit button, they should receive the page that tells and redirects them just to say your roommate group is not open yet. So that doesn't mean your student hasn't reached an error. That's letting you know you've done the last part of the application that you can do thus far, and let you know when roommate groups will be able to be completed at a later date. And it just has some additional information about when room selection will begin in January. Once your student hits the home button, They will receive this email to their App State email. This is the email that I was mentioning earlier that your student will know that their application is complete. When they see this, it's letting you know that on-campus housing is not guaranteed, but you have done the first step in reapplication. This means that your student will or should receive a selection invitation once that process opens up in January. The timing of this email doesn't determine when your student will receive that offer. That part is a little bit more randomized, but this lets your student know that they have completed everything appropriately and correctly to be eligible to receive that notification in January. I know I kind of breezed through a lot of information with that timeline and just all of that other information I provided beforehand in the tutorial. So for people who may not be as visual and just would like to have the dates to like maybe mark on their calendar, which is also why we're sharing this presentation. These are the communication timelines we currently have planned for our students. So on these dates, your students should receive emails and updates about the REAP process and when to go ahead and do the next step. All of our information is also posted on Scala screens in the hall, which are giant TV projectors that your students have to walk past as they go in and out the residence halls. Sorry about that. But that's where you should be able to find a lot more additional information about the REAP process and important deadlines and things like that. And this will also be available later for you to take a picture of and mark your calendars with as well. Kind of going into more roommate group specifics. Students can make a roommate group with other continuing students who live on campus. So if your student is currently living on campus and their roommate is off campus, they wouldn't be eligible for the roommate group search. If your student is looking to room with an incoming freshman or transfer, they also would not be searchable during the roommate group portion of that. That's because students who are on campus and who are currently living on campus, they are the only people a part of the app. So the process doesn't really allow for all those different types of communities to live with one another. But students also may have to have certain livable requirements given the housing scholarship that they received if they are a part of those communities as well. I know that part can get a little bit tricky, so I'm happy to answer any questions about this in more detail during the Q&A portion a little bit later. For continuing students right now, though, when the process opens up in December, one student will create the roommate group. This is considered the group leader. The group leader doesn't have to be anybody in particular, but it's just going to be the person who establishes the roommate group first. Once that is established, students can add or request up to four individuals in that process. So it can be roommate groups of two. So that would be your student and another individual. It can be your student and two other individuals, or it can be your student and three other individuals. We allow this flexibility because as continuing students, they have a little bit more flexibility in their housing options. So an option that wasn't made available previously was apartments. As a continuing student, your student will be eligible for that space pending that we have availability once they receive their selection invitation. Each student will have access to create this group or edit it as they see fit in the housing portal, but they do have to accept and complete all the steps in the housing portal in order to go ahead and solidify and verify their group. We do recommend that all groups are verified to go ahead and continue. And what this allows is for your students to place each other when whichever student receives their selection invitation during that portion in January. So we try to break this process up into 3 steps. So that's the initial application that we just went over, roommate groups, which is the part we're talking about now, and then self-selection, which will come later in January. I do also want to highlight that it is important that students plan their roommate groups. They have a good amount of time to flex and change this if they don't want to live with this individual. Or let's say your student gets all the way to the point that they're selecting their room and they change their mind about who they want to room with. It can be a little bit tricky then, but we do encourage that you start talking about it, thinking about it, finalizing it now, just because friendships can shift, things can change, and that's just naturally what's going to happen as students are in college. So just having that flexibility, we recommend that students talk about it now, so that way they are most comfortable when they're making their housing choices for the upcoming academic year. We do recommend that all roommate groups are finalized though prior to the self-selection window, just to have the best chances of picking and assigning your roommates to different spaces. However, like I said, things happen and your student will have a little bit of flexibility during the self-selection process if they don't want to live with those individuals anymore. So your student doesn't have to make a roommate group. I know like this topic is heavily focused on that, but like I said, you don't have to assign your roommates if you, as a student, changes your mind and you don't want to live with those individuals anymore. But for students to kind of know who they're gonna live with, and have an idea of what their room is gonna look like, have a planned layout for what stuff they want to buy. Having a roommate group is kind of important. For some students who don't want to have a roommate group, though, that is not required. Students can self-select without having that roommate group established. What will happen is students will see all of the rooms that become available, and they would just place themselves in that time at that process. But if your student doesn't want to create a roommate group, they are more than welcome to go random, find roommates on Zme, um, or just take a chance and figure out where their other friends are living after that point. I know I mentioned earlier about the different types of roommate groups, and that's kind of going into these slides about the different style residence halls. For families looking for a more affordable option in housing, we do recommend our traditional styles as they are the most affordable on campus, and this is our 8 halls listed here: Belt, Cannon, Cone, Dogwood, Dalton, Elkstone, Frank, and White. This would only be 2 students to each room, so your student wouldn't be encouraged to make a roommate group of 3 or 4. Try to keep it at 2 people if your student would like to live in traditional hall, as that is the maximum occupancy for those spaces. Next, we have our suite style spaces. So when students create a roommate group of 3 or 4, they are eligible to place all members of their roommate group into these types of halls. These roommate groups would have to be created together, of course, at first. So as long as all 4 students or all 3 students are in a suite, agree to want to live in a suite style space and they create their roommate group, what will then have to happen is 2 individuals of the group would have to decide to live in one side of the suite, and the other 2 individuals will live in the opposite side of the suite. More specifically, when the student receives their self-selection invitation to place each other, they're going to have to place all 4 members in the suite that they would like in order to do that. I'm going to go through what that self-selection process is going to look like in a little bit more detail because I didn't understand how that sounds confusing with me just saying it. But I will show you what that'll look like to place all 4 students so that way students don't end up in the wrong suite or in wrong rooms with one another. Another style that we do offer for our continuing students is hotel style. This would be where 2 students share one bathroom. So this would only be eligible for roommate groups of 2. And for our continuing students, that option is going to be Mountaineer Hall for the upcoming year. And then for our apartment styles that were previously available, these are 4-person spaces that have a kitchen and 2 private bathrooms. Each bathroom will be shared by 2 students, and then each set of students would share their own private room. We have 5 residence halls on campus that currently offers this option, as Appalachian Heights, Laurel Creek, New River, Raven Rocks, and Thunder Hill. But this will accommodate roommate groups of 3 or 4. We can't guarantee what particular spaces will be available during self-selection, but all of our students will have the choices to choose from these options during the self-selection process. And kind of to end the roommate group portion and go over into our next portion of what self-selection would look like. This is just a reminder of what those 2 dates are. So the current projected start date is January 12th, and then we should anticipate to finish sending offers to all of our students February 27th. So, to give you a more visual of what the self-selection period would look like, these parts include having your student place themselves or their roommates into the bed spaces that are available to them, choosing a meal plan, and signing their residence hall license contract. This third part of the process is going to be what allows your student to know, yes, I have secured on-campus housing. I'm going to be living on campus for the 26-27th academic year. So the way our self-selection process works is our StarRes software system randomly generates offers each week. We send those students a reminder email on Friday, and we send them an update email on Monday to let them know that, hey, your time slot is open, go pick your space. And then on Thursday, they will receive another email letting them know that their offer is about to expire. So if they are in a round of emails, they should receive 3 emails: the reminder on Friday is to say check your email Monday, the Monday email that lets them know that it's open, and then Thursday letting them know your offer is about to expire. This is what we use to allow our students to know where they are in the 4-day period to accept their offer. So at this point in time, students are held to a 4-day window of going in, signing their roommates, and signing their contract. If your student has changed their mind, have found off-campus housing, they're more than welcome to deny their offer and to explore those opportunities as well. But they will only have 4 days from the time of receiving their Monday email to complete all the things. We do send these emails in batches, so students may not receive an email the first week or the second week, but that's why we encourage students to continually monitor their email so that way they know if you haven't gotten your email on Friday, check again next Friday. If you haven't gotten your email, keep checking on Fridays or Monday to make sure that you're not missing any communications. And these will be going to the student's App State email. For our students, the chances of being selected to receive on-campus housing is entirely dependent on the numbers we have available and the number of students who choose to apply. So it's a little bit hard to get an exact gauge right now as we still have applications coming in. But students who have housing-related scholarships and which require students to live in location-based communities, those students and current university housing employees like RAs do receive prioritization in our selection invitation process. So for RAs that continue their employment throughout their time of being on campus, they go through a prioritized selection process to ensure that they receive their on-campus housing offers and remain on campus. If your student misses their selection invitation, um, then they will most likely have to go ahead and wait for their opportunity at the end of February. We cannot guarantee that this will be a opportunity that's going to be available, which is really important why your students adhere to monitoring their email and completing this in a timely manner to ensure that they don't get missed out in this portion and to make sure that they sign their residence hall license contract. During self-selection, your student will see all the options that we have available for REAP. So they will see all the rooms we have on campus and all the spaces that are currently available. Unfortunately, if a certain space is not viewable when your student is self-selecting, that means we do not have that space available at this time or that space is not unoccupied. So kind of what they see on the portal is going to be what they get at that point in time. And we recommend that students have a wide range of options in mind. So that way they have multiple backups in their housing styles that they would be comfortable living in as well. This is going to be a more detailed view of what self-selecting a space is going to look like. So for our students, I know I mentioned earlier that students create roommate groups of 3, 4, and up to that nature. With these selection invitations, whoever receives their offer is eligible to assign a student. So you don't have to wait for the group leader to receive an offer. You don't have to be the specific student who has to receive an offer. If your student is comfortable with someone else assigning them, or your student's friends are comfortable with them assigning them, we recommend going in and trying to assign all members of the roommate group so that way they can have these options in their cart. So what this will look like is our rooms will kind of look like these little itemized buildings that they can add to their cart. Your student's not being charged immediately during this process, so there's not going to be a bill at the end of it. That bill will come later by student accounts. But this is how it looks in your student's portal when they're trying to pick a room. So for those suite style beds and apartment style beds that I kind of mentioned earlier, it's gonna tell your student the room that they're adding the student to and the room space. So for this is one of our suite styles in this example, and it has room 601 and 602. If your student is in a roommate group, these rooms share a bathroom, so all four members are going to be in the same space, just in separate rooms. So the two students who want to live together in 601, that is who your student or they will assign themselves to those spaces. And then whoever is comfortable living in 602 will then be assigned to those next spaces. If your student does not have the option to place all four, if like all of these options aren't white and your student can't pick all of them, then that means there's not enough bed spaces to put all the members in the roommate group into that space, and it won't even let them select the space. So please make sure that your student sees this when they're trying to assign all members of like they have a roommate group of 3 or 4 to make sure that they're in the same bed spaces. Let's say your student is in a roommate group of 2 but still wants to live in a suite. Just make sure that your student is putting them in the same room. So if both students are okay with living in 602, it should be 6021 and 6022. Don't put one student in 601 and then another student in 602. And this kind of explains this a little bit further and gives you a little bit more of a visual of what room one and room two would look like versus putting a student in the bed space one and then bed space two. You want to make sure that the students are aligning with the bed spaces so that way you know they're in the same room and then you can see the room further out based off of how they're divided. If that makes a little bit more sense and the picture helps. I'm also more than happy to clarify again. After your student completes self-selecting in that portion of that, they will then be redirected to their meal plan and their contract. So on their page, they will be able to select from their meal plan. If they choose the All Access 7, they're more than welcome to that. And then this will let them know after they completed and assigned all their roommates, picked their meal plan, they will be directed to their contract. So this contract is just letting you know that you are willing to live on campus for the following academic year for the fall and spring semester. And it also reinforms our contract cancellation policies. So students can cancel their contracts without penalty within 2 business days of signing their contract. So if your student signs their contract on Monday, they can reach out to cancel at the latest on Wednesday. If it's Friday that they've signed their contract, then they would have Monday and Tuesday to reach out. After that point, we will no longer honor the waivable cancellation fee. From that 2 day window, the contract cancellation fee goes up to $500, and this runs all the way until May 31st or before May 31st. On May 31st, that cancellation fee goes up to $1,000. Students will receive emails and reminders about this and reminders about our policies once they have signed the contract. And then on July 15th, our contract cancellation goes up to being held for the full academic year. So there's a couple of tiers to the cancellation process. Kind of make sure that your student is willing to commit to this contract once they are ready to submit their on-campus housing application, and keep this in mind as we move forward through the academic year. So this second part of communications, I know I showed one earlier. This is kind of what it's going to look like after your students finish the initial part of REAP. So this is when we start sending out reminders about next steps. This focuses more on the selection invitation, how your students receive emails in the selection invitations, and just let you know when we anticipate completing sending out offers, which is February 23rd. Future communications that your students can expect once they have signed their contract and they are officially confirming they're going to live with us next year. consolidation notices. In our students' contracts, we do have the right to reassign them if necessary, and if applicable. We try not to do this very often, but it does happen, and all students will receive an immediate notice once this has taken place. All students will receive their official assignments updates. So this is going to let them know where they're rooming for next year, and this won't happen until the summer. We also do have room swaps. So worst case scenario, your student doesn't get the style of housing they wanted. They don't end up with their friend like they wanted, and they wanted to just explore any other kind of housing because they didn't make a roommate group. We will send out information about our room swap process, which opens in the summer and allows students to alter their assignment before the academic year begins. And then, kind of like I mentioned earlier with cancellations, we will send more information about cancellation in the cancellation policy throughout the summer as well. So that's kind of my full spiel about on-campus housing and all the things of what that process will look like. Like I said, I'm more than happy to answer questions. But to be mindful of everybody's time, I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy so he can talk to you guys a little bit more about the resident assistant process.
Thanks, T. Good afternoon again, everyone. As we said earlier, my name is Jimmy Kramer. I'm one of the assistant directors for University Housing with Residence Life. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm excited to share a little bit with you all about the RA process and the RA position specifically. So in terms of our position description, our RAs are really focused on building relationships with roughly the 40-ish residents in their assigned community slash floor area. Our purpose is to build community through intentional interactions and hosting social programs. And so each semester, RAs are required to host a number of events, whether it's by themselves, in a partnership with another RA in the building, or through their entire building staff holding a building-wide program. Again, these programs are social in nature, and they're really geared towards directing our RAs and helping the residents in the communities connect with one another and create lasting relationships and friendships that hopefully will last for a very long time. RAs also play a key role in supporting residents through personal, social, academic experiences in the halls. And so oftentimes our RAs are the first point of contact for somebody that's come back from campus and had a poor performance on a test or struggled with academic class assignment group and was not sure what to do. And our RAs will be there to help answer those questions or connect them to resources. Additionally, sometimes RA residents will have personal situations that are impacting them academically here in college. And so our RAs are there as well to help connect them with the counseling center, other resources across campus that will really be able to help those students through those difficult moments, whether they're academic, social, or personal issues. A huge, whoops, go back to the next slide, sorry. They do serve in an on-call rotation to help ensure the safety and security of the residence halls. So every night, starting at 5 p.m., we have RAs that are on duty. And so RAs will work within their staff to create that schedule. And so whether they're a staff of 5, like that is in Elkstone Hall, or a staff of 20 that is in New River Hall, that staff will create that duty schedule for the semester. They are on call from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. and then 24 hours from 5 p.m. Friday night until 8 a.m. Monday morning. And then lastly, they work to inform residents of university and departmental policies and things that are coming up that they should be aware of as residents in our buildings. So in terms of compensation for the resident assistant position, RAs are compensated hourly. And so their primary rate is $11 an hour. And that is for everything that they do in the RA role throughout the course of the academic year. There are times, the anticipated amount of hours that staff will work will depend on their staff size. So as I said earlier, a staff of 5 in Elkstone is anticipated to work a little bit more frequently than RAs that are in a larger staff like 20 or 14 in some of our larger buildings. And so the smaller the staff, generally you can anticipate a larger amount of hours to work over the course of the semester. We do have extra opportunities available to staff to work, and that is paid at $15 an hour. So if they volunteer to be on break duty, so like we had fall break this a couple weekends ago. So we had some RAs that stayed back and they worked in a number of buildings, answering the phone calls and responding to situations where there was a lockout or a facilities issue or just a question about something that was going on during fall break. Those are paid at $15 an hour for those special opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, anticipated hours is dependent on the size of the RA staff, and they choose because, like I said, a staff of 5 in Elkstone will be on duty more frequently than a staff of 20 in New River or a staff of 14 in Laurel Creek or Thunder Hill. They do have priority in the reapplication process, as T mentioned earlier. And so in order to be an RA, they have to complete this application process that T just outlined for us at the beginning of this session. They will receive on-campus housing at the lowest rate charge for that academic year, regardless of where they're placed and what building they're going to be in. We do have some priority in the university parking process. And so over the course of the summer, RAs will be asked to send us their information in terms of their vehicle registration, and we will work to get those cars registered with our parking services team prior to the general student population being opened up. And so generally this allows us to help them get parked as close to their building as possible. But the cost of parking is still up to the student themselves. We just work on prioritizing them in the process so they can get closer parking to the lots that are available near their building. And then lastly, one of the changes that we made for this year in working with dining services is that RAs are going to be able to choose whatever meal plan they want for dining services. And so in the past, they were always kind of stuck, or they were always choosing between the two main options, and they'll have more variety of what types of meal plans that they want to choose for the 2026-2027 academic year when they go through the application process that T outlined earlier, and they select or sign their contract for 26 and 27. And so in terms of just the process and where we are right now, generally we ask the candidates to research the position throughout the month of September. And then at the end of September, we start having our information sessions that started on September 29th. And then our last information session is actually tonight at 7 p.m. in the 3 Top Mountain Room in the Plemmons Student Union. The application is due next Monday night. And then our interview process will start on Wednesday, the 29th of October, and run through November 6th. We're hoping that we'll be able to announce hiring decisions by reading day, but we do hire RAs all throughout the course of the year because of study abroad opportunities, personal plans that have changed, a variety of situations that we will hire from this pool of candidates from now through next fall. I shared at our information sessions earlier this month. I hired our last RA for this academic year on the 3rd day of move-in while we were doing a check-in shift in New River parking lot. And so we do hire continuously throughout the year from this pool of candidates. After they're selected into the role, they'll be asked to attend an App Community 101 session, which is where they'll learn a little bit more about each building and what each building would be like if they were to be an RA in that space. They will choose their placement, where they're going to be in terms of an RA for next year, at our placement celebrations at the end of January. And then we have a brief orientation session in April where we kind of just bring them together and kind of remind them about things to look out for over the summer, reminders about what training is going to look like when they come back to school in July, and just really kind of help them meet their staff for the first time for that next year. And then RA training will begin on July 27th. The meeting time for the information sessions and location for tonight is at 7 p.m. in 3 Top Mountain in the Student Union. So it's right next to CEL and that main door entrance to Summit Hall if your student's coming in there.
And
then
go ahead. So these are just like our main contacts for reaching out to if you have any additional questions about housing after this presentation is over. I believe I'm kicking it back to Haley to begin the Q&A portion. So either I, Jimmy, or Amanda can answer more direct questions that you guys may have about the PowerPoint or anything in particular. But yeah, that's our spiel about on-campus housing, rehab, and RAs.
Ian, Jimmy, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Confirming, we have a couple questions in the chat that are all about the session tonight. So confirming 7 p.m. in 3 Top Mountain in the Plemmons Student Union. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And perfect. I just dropped that in the chat as well. So if you needed to copy and paste that or send it over to your student, 3 Top Mountain is just a room within the Plemmons Student Union. So 7 p.m. tonight.
And if they're unable to attend tonight, they can email us at raprocess .appstate.edu, and we'll get them a video of the recorded session and some other materials that we need to apply.
Email. Can you repeat the email one more time, Jimmy? I'm going to drop that in the chat as well.
It is raprocess@appstate.edu.
Perfect. Excellent. Just drop that in the chat as well. Let's see. We only have one more question, so we'll answer this one and then we can close out. The question says, do returning students have the option to choose a traditional residence hall? I had seen somewhere those were for freshmen only.
So they don't get to pick it in the self-selection. That does it because they are mostly reserved for incoming first year students. What I would recommend is having that individual reach out to us at the housing@appstate.edu, so that way we can better communicate with them about what their process would look like if a traditional option is like all they're looking at for right now.
Fabulous. And then we just had one more question come in, so we'll take this one as well. You may have already said this. Do RAs have roommates or suite mates?
So our goal is to have RAs have private rooms for the academic year. In a case where we're in an overflow situation, there is a chance that RAs might have a roommate for a very slight period of time. But our administrative services team with Amanda and T and everyone else will work as quickly as they can to have those students moved out of those spaces as soon as possible. And so this year, we started communicating with RAs, I believe in July, that it was a potential that they may have a roommate because of an overflow situation. But as by the time move-in happened, we only had one student that had picked up keys for a room, but then they were quickly assigned to another space that had opened up. And so it's a little bit of a moving projection in terms of how that will play out, but we will do our very best to have them have a private room as quickly as possible. And then there are some rooms, to go on to the next question, Haley, that RAs may choose to have a roommate, and those would be RA rooms in App Heights, Newland, and LLC, I believe. Am I missing one, Amanda or T? Okay.
I just wanted to jump in. Also, hi everyone. I wasn't on camera before, but I'm Amanda Cutchins. I'm the Associate Director for Student and Administrative Services in University Housing. I did want to clarify two things that came up in the Q&A and then I thought were important for everybody to know. The first was the very first question that was asked, actually, for roommate groups. Do all of the members of the roommate group need to complete the REAP in order to be considered for the roommate group? And then do they all four need to get selected for the lottery? The answer to that is that they do all need to complete REAP in order to make the roommate group later in the process, but they do not all need to be selected in the lottery. As long as at least one of them is selected, they would assign their fellow roommates, and then those roommates would get an email later that all they need to do is go sign their contract. Sorry. So hopefully that is clarified. And then the second thing was someone asked, actually it was the second question, do you so you will not have an option for getting a suite if you don't have 4 people in your roommate group. If you only have 2 people, you can't choose a suite and have 2 other people on the other side. And that is to clarify, you can choose a suite or an apartment if you only have a roommate group of 2. So your roommate group number does not limit you to what you can choose.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Amanda, for that. And thank you both T and Jimmy as well for leading us today and sharing so much more. I know that this can be an intricate process, so I think it was super helpful for that, and great that we have the recording and the slides that you thoughtfully laid out for us so we can see the timeline. So thank you all to our families for joining today and for your engagement, asking questions. This is great. We want to make sure that you have the information that you need to help your students make informed decisions when it comes to their housing here at App State. So if you still have any questions that come up that were not answered on the webinar, like we said, please send those over to housing@appstate.edu. We'll drop that in the chat too, so you can see that. And we'll make sure that we follow up with you personally. So Zoe will go ahead and drop that in so that you can copy and paste it for later. So as a reminder, this is the second webinar of our family webinar series. So we had one about off-campus housing last month. This month is on-campus housing, and next month, as you may have seen in the first Zoom link, is for student success. So we'll have a registration link for that available on the Mountaineer Family Experience portal or the parent portal, same place you registered for this one. And that is where you'll hear from Dr. Sharnita Lee, and she will talk a little bit more about all the important things in student success: tutoring, college success seminar, academic advising, so much more. So if you're interested in that, the app or the registration link will be up for you in the next couple of weeks on the Mountaineer Family Experience portal. And again, we recorded this and we'll have this up at the end of this week or early next week. So thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it. And we